Dr. Harry Agbanu was a union executive, teacher union executive in the past. He's also a religious lecturer at the University of Ghana. Doc, you're welcome to Eyewitness News.
Thank you very much. Good evening to your cherished listeners.
Good evening to you. You have been opposed to the abolishment or abolishing of this particular law. Now, the gavel is down, the law is out, at least, of course. I'm not sure whether this will need presidential assent or it becomes law immediately. But effectively, what it means is that the death penalty is off the books. You should be disappointed.
Yes, not entirely disappointed, but all I know is that it will seem as though the floodgate has been opened for violent criminal activities by some members of our society. That is unfortunate, and I'm just praying that the opportunity is not being created for people to take the law into their own hands by engaging in, this mob action.
You have not been convinced, despite all the debate in the chamber on this law before it was abolished.
There has not been any sound argument in favor of the abolishment of the death penalty, apart from saying that Ghana has signed to some international protocols and that we have leaders for the past 30 years who have not signed for the killing of this. Apart from those two arguments and the moot argument from the perspective of human rights, there has not been any sound argument in favor of this action that has been taken by Parliament.
I see. Please indulge me. I want you to be on the line. I want to hear from the proponent of the bill, so that maybe he may convince you just once and for all before we get off this conversation. The Honourable Member of Parliament for Madina is Francis-Xavier Sosu. Sir, you're welcome to Eyewitness News.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mara, and a very good evening to your cherished listeners.
Thank you. Just educate me. Are you the only person who brought this to the House because it was a private member's bill, or there were other MPs who supported you?
I was the only one who brought it to the House, but obviously I brought it because the rules allows for private members to do that.
Okay, so I want to know
a single sponsor, or it could be multiple sponsors.
Yeah. But you are the only sponsor. You are the only sponsor.
Yes,
okay.
Yes,
and today, when the gavel came down, was it a vote or it was a voice vote that the Speaker agreed with the ayes?
Well, it was a voice vote that the Speaker agreed with the ayes.
Okay. Were there any vehement opposition or members to your bill?
Well, I think that people have made various arguments in opposition. For example, what I just said, that they may be handing over the country to criminals. People also have argued that there is some deterrence effect of the death penalty. And a few others also have argued that the abolition seemed to favor only the people convicted rather than victims. In other words, what becomes of victims of crimes that attract death penalty. So these were some of the major arguments I've heard. A few others were on religious grounds, but they were not very strong arguments because in Christianity, we all know the issues about Christianity and how Jesus would treat a woman who was caught in adultery, who was due for death penalty. In fact, he essentially just forgave her and let her go. In Islam, there are several provisions, including teachings of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which suggest that even when people are caught or are convicted of punishment or of offenses that may attract even death penalty, if they can atone or pay or recompense for their sins, they could be forgiven. So there are higher values of mercy and higher values of forgiveness and higher values of love, both in Islam and Christianity. And also, clearly, we must also understand that the laws that we do are not necessarily religious laws. To that extent, people who are convicted today were not convicted under Christian law or Sharia law or any other law. They are convicted under civil law. which for over 30 years has not worked. And so these are some of the arguments that we've heard. And I could hear from the other side the same argument saying that there hasn't been any sound argument. I think that there have been very, very sound arguments in support of abolition. And not only are those arguments sound, those arguments are also research-based. In fact, for all those who have spoken against abolition of death penalty, I'm yet to see one single research pointing towards or supporting the arguments they make. For example, when you take deterrence, there are several researches conducted in Africa and Europe and other countries, even in U.S., where they retain death penalty at the federal level, but at state level, many states have moved away from death penalty. There have been comparative studies between states with death penalty and states without death penalty. And consistently, the evidence available shows that in states where there are death penalties, there is increased murder and violent crime. And states where there are no death penalties, the society naturally grows to become more civil, and such violent crimes reduce. And when you come to Africa, there are several evidence pointing to that. And so the argument of deterrence has already been diffused by research. And then the issue of no president ever signing, it's a very critical issue because, Umaru, when somebody is sentenced to death, there is a legitimate expectation of death. And so the victim do not have closure, nor the one who has been convicted. Because now the person is kept on the show for like several years in jail. And the one who is also sent on the floor is also not killed. So there is no closure within the system. And also we say that death penalty is too final. When you read the Constitutional Review Commission's report, you read the government white paper, you read the views of the Chief Justice, Her Ladyship Justice Tokonu, you read the views of Justice Toche in Dexter Johnson versus the Republic, you read the views of almost all Supreme Court justices who have recently been nominated and were vetted and questioned on these matters. Everyone, including the publication by the military, the Christian Council, Ghana Catholic Bishops Conference, everyone has said that there could be mistake. You could, for the fact that you could kill someone who you shouldn't have killed. So it's difficult to endorse death penalty when you know that we could make mistakes. And, the last time when the debate was ongoing, B.T. Baba made it very clear on the floor of Parliament. Now, even as a director of operations for Ghana prisons, when they were selecting names one of those days, a name was added, he was executed, only for it to turn out to be a mistaken identity. So these are the reasons why I believe that today Parliament did the needful and made Ghana proud in the Committee of Nations. This means that Ghana is about the 28th African country to have abolished the penalty. In the world, I'm sure we'll be joining some 128 other countries who have already completely abolished the penalty. And so I think this is a good thing for Ghana.
I see. I know that it's been passed. That will be it. But for people who are still not convinced, well, the law still binds them. One of them is on the other line. I just want to ask him if he's convinced by your explanation, and then I'll come back to you. So if you don't mind, kindly stay on the line. Dr. Harry Agbanu, you've listened to the Member of Parliament, the proponent of this bill. You're being convinced, otherwise may not have any impact on the law now, but at least he has tried to explain to you the position that he took to Parliament, which position has been accepted by the House. Are you convinced tonight?
Not at all. It has not been convincing at all, because all the arguments he makes are arguments that have been made here again and again and have been responded to. He was talking about research in the U.S. and other places where it's been determined that the deterrent value of the death penalty has no effect. It is not accurate. You should go to Thailand. You should go to Malaysia. You go to those places where drug offenses are punishable by death and compare the rate at which people do drugs and to where in a situation where people are just, imprisoned and allowed to come back to enjoy their booty. It should do that. That the deterrent value of the death penalty is great. Omaru, every human action is motivated by the preservation of the individual's life. Everything you do, ask yourself, why do you do it? You do it because you want to preserve your life. And so anything that will put your life at jeopardy, you wouldn't want to do. So if that is taken away, then people are now free to do whatever they want because there is nothing that will jeopardize their life.
But are you not convinced by the argument of mistaken death? Are you not concerned that you may be accused tomorrow of killing someone, you, Dr. Harry Agbanu? You'll be put before court. There could be a challenge with the prosecution. You may not be heard properly. Something may have happened. And then you get sentenced to death, and then immediately you're hanged, only for it to emerge subsequently that you were not the one who committed that crime. You're not worried about such a situation?
It's not the punishment. The problem is the system. The punishment is not the problem. It's the system that is faulty. That must be worked on. Otherwise, then nobody should be punished for anything because there is a possibility of mistake. Even imprisonment, there could be mistake. Even whipping somebody, there could be mistake. So it's the system that we must be talking about, not the punishment per se. I agree that mistakes are made. Everywhere, no human institution is perfect. And so if we are afraid of mistakes and we are saying that because of mistakes, we are prescribing the death penalty, then there should not be any punishment regime. Because there are three objectives that every punishment regime must achieve, one or two. Deterrent is the very important one. Reformation or rehabilitation and restitution. Who says that if you go and steal somebody's money, I don't even want to express this for your listener to understand. I'm saying that there is need for restitution, vengeance as an objective for punishment. People are talking about Jesus Christ and whatever. I don't get it.
Okay.
Are we only dealing with the New Testament, or we are understanding the New Testament from the perspective of the Old Testament?
Very well. Thank you for speaking to us, Doc. That's Dr. Harry Agbanu, a religious lecturer at the University of Ghana who is not happy with the abolition of the death penalty and convinced by the argument. Honorable Francis-Xavier Sosu, you may want to respond to him so that we end the conversation.
Well, let me just say that, look, punishment has evolved over the years. Historically, punishment was repressive. So if you recall, even in our cultural settings, there was human sacrifice, that's what we used to call pioneering, and so on and so forth. If you go to 14th century, 15th century, 16th century, all the way to the 19th century, there were all forms of very repressive punishment. Over the years, society evolved. Punishment moved from repressiveness to reform. And now focus on how you can...
Hello? Apologies, we lost the Madina Member of Parliament, Francis-Xavier Sosu, but we're about to end our conversation anyway. He was sharing with us his view. He's a proponent of the bill that sought to abolish the death penalty, and which bill has been carried. The House of Parliament passes that, and also the death penalty now, I'm not sure whether the President will need to sign off before it becomes law, but the House has done its work, and so it's waiting for presidential assent to become law.